Welcome to the Veriditas podcast, where we explore heterodox thoughts on politics, sex, and culture with an exciting lineup of international guests. I am your host, Dr. Petra Buskins, and I'll be asking guests, what is it that distinguishes this political and cultural moment? Why isn't the world making sense anymore? What is reality in an algorithmically driven world? How can we regenerate our psyches and societies?
Okay, hello, Peter. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Petra.
Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So you're a bit of a pivot for me because I've decided to interview so-called ordinary people. Now you're quite extraordinary, actually, but I've been interviewing a lot of people who have published books or who have profiles as speakers and writers. But I'm wanting to interview people such as yourself, professionals who lost their jobs in that whole COVID period due to the quote unquote public health measures, or who opted out or who found creative ways of living outside the system, simply because we really haven't had a public discussion about the costs for people who were working and now are not as a result of the COVID measures. And you'd actually contacted me and said, I was involved in this research project. So I'd also like to hear a bit about that. But perhaps we just simply start with your story.
Well, originally I was aiming for general practice when I first graduated in the early 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
I never actually ended up properly in general practice. I did some general practice that I ended up after working overseas. Right, I was working overseas while I was working. And I ended up volunteering in India for a few years in Calcutta, as it was then, now called Kolkata. And that's where I met Pascal, in Calcutta, in the back street in Calcutta. And
How romantic.
Yeah, I was volunteering with a group called Calcutta Rescue.
Mm-hmm.
For about 8 years. First went in there in 1986. And finally, after the chap who ran the organisation had obtained his official registration and dealt with a whole lot of political problems that were in India, and he was settled down and funding was coming through and they were able to employ local doctors, I packed up and left in 1994 and came back here and was going to settle into general practice. And I've gone through the general practice training program. And while I was away, we were told when we graduated that vocational registration for GPs was going to come in. However, we were also told that it was not going to be retrospective for existing graduates and for existing GPs.
Can you explain for the layperson what vocational registration is?
It's a postgraduate registration after doing a basic medical degree for general practitioners, where they have to be registered. They have to have done a particular postgraduate training program.
In order to register.
In order to be registered, vocationally registered GP. Now,
right.
So that was the original idea, that I would work overseas. So I had actually done the family medicine program.
Mm-hmm.
Was in those days, which went for years. And I had actually always kept 6 months of it untouched, but I didn't do it. My thought was when I eventually stopped traveling and working in different places, I've worked in Britain, as I worked in India. The idea was I would spend 6 months in a training practice and then just to pick up on my skills and get the new paperwork and bureaucracy that had probably come in my absence, and then drift off into general practice.
Anyway,
they changed the rules.
More regulation.
That's right. So this is why I'm starting with this. Rather than just being grandfathered straight in to vocational registration, I came back about a matter of weeks after the night that it happened. It was December of 1993, and I came back early in 1994. And it was just a few weeks later, only to find that I was actually not eligible for vocational registration as a GP. But I was allowed to work as a GP as long as I was working in a practice where there were vocationally registered general practitioners.
So, and why were you no longer eligible at all?
Because they just had an arbitrary cut-off date.
Oh.
And the GPs who were in practice at the time and who filled out a bit of paperwork at the time were able to be grandfathered into the new system. But anyone who was out of the system at the time, so that included people like myself who were abroad, people who were up on, say, maternity leave, study leave, all sorts of reasons, doing something else, traveling, these sorts of things, we missed out. A court case about it, which was eventually won by those of us who took it out against governors. And we were eventually grandfathered in, but I never bothered about it by then, because by the time Matador happened, I'd actually found something else to do, which was to go off and assist surgeons. Along the way,
Which was what?
to assist surgeons with operations. So
Right.
when there's a big operation done,
Mm-hmm.
a surgeon will often call someone else in to assist
Mm-hmm.
the larger operations. And I had a lot of surgical experience while I was abroad.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing, and I didn't need vocational registration for that. And so I started, and I really enjoyed it actually. And I did some GP locums while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Time with a view to this court case. I was able to work under the auspices of someone who was vocationally registered.
Mm-hmm.
But there were certain things I wasn't allowed to do unless I had vocational registration, which of course has become tighter and tighter as the years. Yeah, they introduced these things softly.
Yeah, that's right.
And over the next 10, 20 years, they tightened the screws up.
And what do you think the purpose of it was? Because my sense is with all of this, my experience of that with my home birth midwives, that just tightened and tightened and tightened until they really had no autonomy. So what do you think it was about? Both, the ostensible reason and then potentially the real reason.
Yeah, the ostensible reason was to raise the standard of general practice rather than having anybody just drifting into general practice. What has happened actually is that it is pushed out of general practice people who think differently.
Yes.
And that's what happened. So
the standardization, you mean?
Yes. So, for example, at about the time you would have had your daughter, there was an active home birth practitioner in Melbourne called Peter Lucas.
Yeah, I remember him. Yep.
Yes. Well, Peter Lucas would have been pushed out of practice.
Yeah.
Probably, or something would have happened, because Peter Lucas managed to, function on the free for years. By the way, Felix was born in the Southern.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, up in Carista. And
Uh-huh.
Not being obstetrically trained myself, apart from basic undergraduate, I said, no, we're getting midwives for this. And Pascal was keen on it. Because the European, it's a very European thing to do. So she said, no, I'm going for a normal birth. We can do ultrasounds and make sure that we don't have things like a placenta previa or something catastrophic or the kid's going to fit out. But she did, and she just laboured at home, and Felix was born at home.
Yeah, I think she might have told me that at Kathy's. Yeah. Yeah, well, of course, we only went to hospitals when there were problems. It was the default that you were born at home, that you died at home, that if you had the flu, you stayed at home and you had a chicken soup or, this idea that we rush to the doctor is a fairly new one, I think.
That's right. Anyway, of course, I kept that under my hat for most of my career. I didn't sort of advertise the fact that our son had been born at home because there is such a momentum against this in general medical circles that I didn't.
Against home birth?
Against home birth. Oh, yes.
Right. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Yes, mention home birth and people, like mentioning anti-vaxxers, it's all in the same, it's all tarred with the same brush.
Yeah, that's true. I knew that was the case at the level of the government, but I didn't realise that the culture of GPs, the so-called normie GPs had that view, but it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
No, it's right through. And who the worst are often? The nurses.
Oh, interesting. And why do you think that is?
I think because I'm not saying all of them, but they're the ones that they're much more inclined to follow rules.
Yeah, the groupthink mentality.
Groupthink, yeah. And this is what you have to do. And so I'm a nurse, I know. And it's happening with doctors more and more now. I'm a doctor, I know. Let me through, I'm a doctor, I know.
Yeah.
And woe betide anyone who says, wait a minute, let's just let this see it. If something goes wrong, we'll intervene. But
Mm.
that's so I ended up assisting surgeons for the best part of 20 years. Because I think I must confess I wasn't too bad at, because I'm very much a procedural person. And yeah, I've just come in from working on my workshop. I'm always building and constructing and so forth. In fact, I would have been a tradie that I was, um,
Do you mean the vintage trains hobby
yeah,
or something else?
the whole, steam engines, vintage trains, old cars, building a shed at present, and so forth. I'm a kinesthetic individual, which is why I enjoyed surgery. I'm not by nature an academic.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? There isn't really room for professionals who prefer to be outside. Sometimes maybe architects or high level gardeners or something. But I think that can be a real conundrum for people who are trained in the professions but actually prefer to have their hands dirty or to get to be outdoors. Mm.
Yeah, and that's why I like surgeons, because there were surgeons around who did, enjoy doing practical things. And there was one surgeon I used to assist. On Monday morning, we'd be comparing our fingernails to see who had more grease and dirt under his fingernails. Under their fingernails from the
That's
weekend.
scary for the surgeon. I want to see their fingernails.
I know, Ken's touch free, and I'd say, I think mine are dirtier than yours, Ken.
Okay, so you're already in some ways, I'm just thinking from having practiced initially in Calcutta, from, your wife having a home birth, and you were already in some ways, Steiner education and so on, moving toward maybe a more dimensional way of thinking about the body, a more integrative health, holistic way of being. And so you're living like that. And then if we fast track to COVID, I mean, how do you see it? Because, for example, I initially thought we were facing something really serious and was really concerned. And I've noticed this is really common among dissidents. We took it more seriously when everyone was going to the football and didn't care. And then 2 or 3 months in, we kind of go, this is absurd. And then everybody else has doubled down. That was my experience. What was yours?
I think mine was parallel to yours.
Mhm.
And initially I thought, oh dear, this could be bad, because, I knew about things like Ebola and SARS,
Mhm.
and I knew that these things could be serious. But I'm a history nerd, and things like the Black Death, plague, and so forth.
Yeah, I was looking into that too. Yeah. Yep.
And I've always been aware of these things. The typhoid outbreaks that would go through various places. John Snow and the Broad Street Pump, great story. Who brought a typhoid outbreak in London under control by immobilizing a particular pump that was where the water was contaminated.
Oh,
Uh, and it's a great story from the 1850s.
I'll have to
How-
look.
And John Snow and the Broad Street Pump. And I was aware of these things. And like you, I thought that this is going to be bad, and it was bad, but it's not been bad in the way I thought it would. Yeah,
Well, yeah, exactly.
yeah. And then I started discovering people, because the interesting thing was, I think some of the people I worked with in operating theatre
Mhm.
were actually more inclined to be the people who were going to say, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. This doesn't-
Mhm. Mhm.
this is something like. And I remember one surgeon saying, this is ridiculous. No one has ever controlled history. No one ever been able to control a respiratory virus by isolation.
Mhm. Mhm.
It can't work. And then when the mask mandates came out, and I said, wait a minute. This thing is supposed to be between 18 and 25 nanometers in diameter. Wearing a mask to stop it is like putting up chicken wire to keep mosquitoes out.
I remember seeing the memes about that. Yeah, well, I guess surgeons couldn't deny their knowledge, but did some of them anyway? Because I mean, I was in a university environment with people trained to think critically about power, and they didn't. So the groupthink seemed to transcend people's extant training.
There were a few. Look, I've got to be careful what I say, because
Yeah.
I did find some like souls.
Mhm. Mhm. Good.
And we kept in touch, and we exchanged information.
Mhm.
And they have managed to get back into the system, that they've really got to keep their heads below the parapet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
For me, when the mandates eventually hit,
Mhm.
I was eventually just pushed into early retirement. I was looking at soldiering on in medicine part-time into my 70s.
Yeah, okay. So that had been your plan had COVID not intervened.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Just part-time a couple of days a week. But what happened was suddenly, everything was stopped.
Mm, mm,
Everything except for emergency surgery was stopped. I was about 63 at the time,
mhm.
and it was just and then I was mandated out.
Yeah,
Anyway,
okay. So can I just back up and at what point, I know this terminology is a bit loaded, but at what point did you wake up? Was it instant? Because you said you had a parallel journey to me. So I believed it wholeheartedly, just assuming that this could potentially be the Black Death. Took it very seriously, was engaging in loads of hand washing and, leaving the shopping at the door and cleaning it. And, I mean, it was just ridiculous when I look at it now, but I took it seriously. But after about 3 months, I thought we'd see bodies piling up. We would see evidence. There's zero evidence. And then I felt that the sort of to use Gigi Foster's terminology, the sort of cost benefit analysis, like what are the costs of this? They've got to be huge economically, politically, psychologically. I saw my clients in practice, my therapy clients that had all gone online, becoming quite depressed, who lived alone. And I just started to question this. So at what point did you start to question what was happening? And I mean, seriously enough to say, this is wrong. I'm not going along with it.
it's around about March, April, May
Yep.
2020, I started to question.
Okay. So a few months in. Yes, that's about the same time as me. Yep.
A few months in.
Mhm.
And then some stage a bit later, where they started peddling the injection
Mm.
for people.
Yeah.
And one day we had to take a patient around to intensive care after an operation, and
Mhm.
before the mandates came.
Okay. Yeah. So you're still working in 2020.
Yeah.
Uh,
Worked
mhm.
right up until the mandate, and then actually went up and got caught COVID. And then I got
Okay.
an addiction, and I went back.
Oh, good. They accepted that because you'd had COVID. They
Yeah,
accepted
that's
national
right.
immunity.
I just got an exemption because I had COVID. You weren't allowed to have an injection within
Yeah.
having COVID. They kept moving the goalposts as to how long it was. The time I got it, I think it was now 4 or 5 months. Initially, it was 6 months. Europe, they had 2 years, which I
Yeah.
think is, because it's funny immune responses if you pile vaccines on top of the disease or vice versa.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I've seen some weird stuff
Yeah.
happen in my lifetime where, so the vaccines and the disease get very close together. All sorts of weird, you got to realize that most of them actually don't know what they're doing.
Mm.
Just because they've got some fancy words in their narrative. No, we don't know. It's a model. The whole virus vaccine exercise, it's a model. It's pretty sophisticated in places, but it is just a model. In the same way as, for example, Christianity was a model to explain the universe in Europe, and it is still taken quite literally in some circles in the Middle Ages, and eventually led to the trial of Galileo because he was suddenly, when was that, 1612, he was criticising, what the dogma was. So, you look at where we are now, a few centuries later, we actually haven't come any further.
Yeah. So do you mean the pharmaceutical industry or the pharmaceutical scientists don't know what they're talking about, or do you mean the doctors administering?
Probably they don't. They're working on a model, but they inherently believe it in the same way as the Catholic Church and most of the officers of the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages believe, literally that what the scriptures said were actually totally correct, rather than saying they're actually metaphor.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying they've got a values-based position. I think the terminology now is priors. They've got a bunch of priors that mean they're already committed to believing in it. Yeah. I mean, the model piece is interesting because I know when that became clear to me that these were models about death rates and they were projected death rates that were sometimes up to like 80% of the population, which is part of why it was so scary initially. And that was absurd when put against the actual fatality rates, which were minuscule. And because they seem to quote on the news media endlessly the models rather than the actual death rates, there was this mass level confusion.
Well, and then so 2020 rolled on, there were a whole lot of inconsistencies that kept coming up. One
Mhm.
was that it was not spreading through sub-Saharan Africa and wiping out sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, that was an interesting one.
Another one was it did not wipe out the Amish community in America. In fact, the Amish community did very well. In fact, I think from what someone I know who's involved with a project of the Amish, he's not actually an Amish himself.
Mhm.
He's an innovative agriculturalist, and he actually does consultancy work with them. He has a lot to do with it. And
Mhm.
he was in touch with them. And apparently, as far as they were concerned, it was all done and dusted by about May of 2020. And yes, a few people had died, but they actually didn't feel that more people had died than normally died over the course of the period, just that they died in a cluster.
Mhm.
Generally, the priority.
That's right. I mean, that's the other piece about who died. Yeah.
So there were always inconsistencies, and then along came the injection.
Mm.
And we were told it was going to be, safe and effective. It was going to stop this, and the goalposts just kept moving.
Mm.
So we had to have 60% of the population, and we'd stop it in its tracks. Then we had to get 70%, and then 80%.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and it just kept moving. And then
That's true. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah.
then you had the situation where Israel, Singapore, South Korea, and I think Greenland, achieved, but not, were very early with their vaccination program. And in fact, Gibraltar, I think, achieved something like 99% injection rate, because they're not vaccines, they're rate in their communities, which I think is only about 35,000, but it's still, it's still significant.
Mm-hmm.
Including the day workers that came in, I think they got over 100%. But for the rate. Anyway, these groups, these countries, all were 6-9 months in front of us.
Yeah. And they still had COVID. Yeah.
We actually looked at the results. Yeah, fine. They got a little window of a couple of months when the rate of COVID declined, and then suddenly it took off again.
Mm.
And that's exactly what you would expect if you had a mutating virus
Mhm.
and you try and run some form of immune program against it.
Mhm. You mean because it's going to, in lay person's terms, it's going to run its course anyway. So you can't.
It's going to mutate faster than you can roll the injections out.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
And in fact, the mutations are already there. I mean, it's mutating all the time.
Mhm.
And then I discovered Nikolai Petrovsky
Mhm.
at his university.
Was he the one who developed an alternative vaccine?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
vaccine. Why did make vaccines since time immemorial almost?
Yes.
You take a bit of the protein, dead, inert, not going to do anything. You munch it up, you mix it in with something that's going to irritate the immune system a little bit. Preferably don't use aluminium and shit like that, like big farmers using now. Or maybe oak or something, and then you just inject it, and the body creates an immune response locally. That's how it works.
Well, wasn't that the definition of vaccine until they decided to revise it? I mean, that's how it used to work. An inert substance, stimulate the immune system. Yeah.
Well, vaccine comes from vaccina, which means cow.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, because it had been known. It comes from cowpox because it had been known since in the working classes. It had been known since time immemorial.
Yeah, it was about the maids, wasn't it?
Well, but the working classes had always going to have cowpox. They're going to be protected against smallpox.
Yeah.
And if they had cow TB, bovine TB, they'd be protected against TB. This was known in the working classes. It's just that the middle class,
sort of vernacular wisdom. Mhm.
yeah. And then they suddenly the middle classes start talking to the working classes and discover this, and then pat themselves on the back and say, "Oh, we wonderful, we've discovered this." When in fact it's been known in the working classes for centuries. Anyway,
Yeah, funny and
you see the BCG vaccine against TB is just really a form of cowpox. Bovine TB is what that is. That's how we got that. Anyway, so what I noticed was the rate to pick up again at 2 months, which is exactly what you'd expect to happen. Because against a mutating organism, your unvaccinated group is going to be the group that's going to give you the herd immunity.
Yeah, I remember Geert Bochten, the Dutch immunologist, saying he also thought that we'd been That's right, Van den Bosch. We'd been big trouble actually with
Yes.
this mutation and getting a vaccine. I remember being quite alarmed by what he was saying.
Yes, yes,
Ah.
yes, 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 yes. He was a bit of a, yeah, I must admit, look, neither of the official narratives have come to pass as badly as we thought they were going to be. Then again, also, I think most of the catastrophic counter narratives have not necessarily come to pass.
Yes, yes, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we didn't all
yeah.
die from mutations that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I expected would happen.
Mhm.
This will just burn out because this is what these things do. Anyway, Petrovsky in Adelaide, when the sequence was eventually released,
Mhm.
he subjected to his analysis and he came up with these. He said, listen, there are a lot of sequences here that don't exist in nature. This didn't come out of a wet market.
Another whole contentious discussion. Yes.
This come out of a bloody laboratory. Well, of course, he was vilified and dismissed as, right-wing neo-Nazi conspiracy theorist and so forth. You're fairly right.
Yeah. Now that's the official line.
That is your line, yeah. And people can't see these inconsistencies. And I remember when he came out with that, and I was following the guy. In fact, I put myself forward to be to go into his vaccination program as a because he's going to use a protein vaccine.
Yeah, as a test subject.
Yeah, and as a test subject, I thought, look, it can't do much. It can't do much harm. The only thing it can do is maybe cause a bit of confusion around the place. I might get a bit sicker sometime down the track, but it's not going to be catastrophic.
Mhm.
There's an amazing ability to reset itself. We've got to realize.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I thought, great, but this is man-made. We're laughing because if it's man-made, it's going to be really, really unstable.
Okay. I'm more worried about the Frankenstein dimension, that it will get a life of its own.
In the short term, yes. But there's a phenomenon in genetics called regression to the mean.
Okay.
In any population pool, as things reproduce, unless they actually have an evolutionary advantage, as things reproduce, that they will eventually regress back to what is the need in that population pool.
So there'll be a bit of sort of genetic experimentation and then a reset back to the norm.
Yeah, it's called regression to the mean. You see it in any genetic population. Unless it's a genuine advantage. If something has a genuine advantage, then that will give it an advantage and it will reproduce more and that will eventually become the dominant strain.
Yeah.
Darwin, 1859.
Yeah.
And Gregor Mendel was the other one. But mind you, Gregor Mendel got some of his results too. The European mark. But anyway, so I thought, well, this is obviously just going to very quickly regress back to being just a really bad cold.
With the dip.
Anyway,
Okay, so at the point at which the mandates came in, so you were delaying, you got this extension because you had caught COVID, which was 3 months, was it? Or was it 6 months?
I think 4 months at the time. It might have been 3. I can't remember.
Okay, so were you already, conscious and politically aware and saying, I'm not going to get this vaccine? Was that your position?
Or at this stage it was because I had looked at the results that were coming out of Israel, Singapore, South Korea, Iceland, Gibraltar, and what those results showed quite clear was that your rate goes up and your death rate doesn't improve once you've given this vaccination program, because by the time it comes out, it's providing a response to an extinct variant of the virus.
Yes, I remember when someone illuminated me to that. Yeah, the virus has already mutated, you mean, so that it's no longer vaccinating against that. But what about, that's the effective piece we're questioning, but what about the safe piece? Were you concerned about the safety in that way that some were about the potential genetic alterations of the spike protein and the higher cancer rates that have been proposed? And were you concerned about some of that stuff?
I was concerned about the possibility of the mRNA, which is of course not a messenger RNA, it's a modified RNA. Doing its nasty bit through what they call the reverse transcriptase, which is when it can actually backward code into your DNA.
Yeah, that concerned me too. And that's what it does, isn't it? That's what it's meant to do. Yeah.
And that was even before they started, looking at plasmid DNA contamination and all that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, it actually ended up being far worse than even I suspected.
Okay. And why is that?
All these other things, the fact that it can incorporate in people's DNA.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing was, word eventually got around that there was a doctor who was questioning the official narrative. So I had every man and his dog, it seemed, approaching me, saying, "Look, you're not in general practice at present, but I've got this, I've got that." Da, 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 da.
Yeah. Would you write an exemption for me?
No, I couldn't do that because I wasn't vocationally registered in practice. So I couldn't,
Mhm.
no, but just talk to me about it. So I had people coming to me. I said, "We're just going to sit down and talk about it."
I
And
see.
no
Right.
reports.
Mm.
Sometimes people had COVID, I'd go and see them. Now, I walked into countless houses where people had COVID.
Oh, like an old school doctor. By the way, I can edit this out if you don't want this in the public.
I'm registered, Matt.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I never caught it. It's
Mhm.
finally I used to see. Now, of all things,
Oh, okay. While you were going into people's homes who had it.
I was went in and saw them, and I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, it wasn't stupid. I didn't sort of sit right in front of them." But anyway, I would say, "Okay, what you've got to do is you've got to do this." And I had a couple of pulse little oximeters, and I said, "Take this thing, keep an eye on your blood oxygen. Your blood oxygen starts to drop down below about 97%, getting down, to below 90. Give me a ring."
Mhm.
At this stage, I realized that this was a politically charged exercise in mega fraud. And I realized that everyone was vulnerable. I didn't know how far it went. But, this is one of the big things that blew me apart was going to protests and, when we were shot at with bloody rubber bullets.
Oh, you went to those early ones, did you?
I went to protests. And the media would report that a couple of thousand right-wing neo-Nazi conspiracy theorists were protesting against what was going on. Well, but blimey, I was there. There are hundreds of thousands of people I could see.
I know. I was there for the later ones when it wasn't illegal, and I was floored too. I remember showing my daughter, we read in The Guardian that night exactly a couple of thousand neo-Nazis. And it was so shocking to see an absolute lie written in the paper. We know there's the word Ben Slant, but it was abject lies.
It was lying. Yeah, it was.
And there were so many. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Just regular people. Yeah.
And a lot of immigrants.
Yes, a lot of immigrants.
A lot of immigrant families. And I looked around there and I thought, hey, this is mainly immigrant families here. These people have come from countries where they're used to governments lying to them.
Yeah.
And they hear the language. Now, there was one doctor I worked with quite early on. And I better be careful what I say because this person is still in practice and came from a country, escaped from a country many years ago, where they had a totalitarian regime. And one day we were in intensive care during the early phase of the injection program. He around and said, "Come and have a look at this." She showed me this one, this one, this one. And we went around the intensive care in this hospital and it was bed after bed after bed after bed of young, fit males.
Yeah.
Aged in their 20s and 30s.
Oh.
Cardiac monitors with some cardiac monitors that even I could look at and say, "Well, that doesn't look good."
No.
Post-injection.
Yeah. The myocarditis. It was so.
And you hear these liars. Dan Andrews, Greg Hunt, Brett Sutton, Macron, it didn't matter what language it is. They're all parroting word for word. That's the same thing.
Word for word.
Yeah, word for word. Safe and effective.
Yeah. Yeah, they'd clearly been given the narrative. Whether they defined it as, education or it came from their boss or, we all saw it.
And I'd come out of intensive care, and this is just one intensive care unit in Melbourne before they started the next program. Wow, the person's ridiculous.
And so did that doctor, who will remain nameless, was she essentially saying there's something deeply wrong here? This is harming these young men.
Went as far as to say, the narrative I'm hearing is exactly the nature of the narrative the way it is being presented, if you translate it to my native language, and I won't say what it was, if you translate this, it is the same gut language that we grew up with from government.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frighten people into performing absolute crazy things.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And any opposition is defined as either crazy or bigoted, or there wasn't, I mean, what I found really disturbing and was part of my experience of waking up was that you couldn't oppose it. It was no longer within what we'd call the democratic arena. It wasn't open for discussion. And it didn't matter if people were credentialed. I don't think you should have to be credentialed to participate in democratic opposition. But even among credentialed people, and we saw them start to come forward, mainly within the American press that I saw, like the Peter McCullers and so on, and they were just pilloried and lost their jobs, and there was no capacity. And now I find, like Sutton came forward not so long ago saying, I think there was a bit of overreach and I think we went a bit far. And it's like, we couldn't have that conversation then. Many of us felt that then. But there was no scope for opposition without losing your job. And that's totalitarian, or worse, being defined as an enemy of the state.
Well, anyway, back to all the people who came to see you about their COVID.
Yeah.
All the people,
The doctor.
one person, an incredibly fit, lean, vegetarian yoga practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Bloke. He's the only person who got into trouble with it. And that was the Delta variant.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of his family had it as well, but they just got over it. But this guy got really, really, really sick. And
had he been vaccinated?
No. He,
okay, right. Yep.
Yeah. Now, all these people were unjuiced.
Yeah. That's what I meant. You were the dissident doctor. You were the doctor.
Yeah. People who had refused the juice. And this guy was militant. He went down to his local GP and abused his GP for giving people the injections. I mean, he's at the top on that respect. But anyway, he's the one person who really nearly died. And I was following the Chetty regimen from the guy in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
He said people who are getting into trouble, what's happening is it's setting up a thing called the complement cascade. At a certain point, I think it's about day 7, or might have been day 10. I think it's day 7. And if people aren't improving by then what's happening is complement cascade. It's this immune overreaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's causing the problem. And he says, what you have to do is you just have to dampen it down.
Mm-hmm.
Down to the massive doses of steroids and ivermectin.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this guy...
Ivermectin was illegal at this point, wasn't it?
Let's stop. I lived in Asia for 8 years.
Mm. Yeah, well, it won Nobel Prize 5 minutes earlier, hadn't it?
Brilliant.
So
when they made ivermectin illegal, that was another real alarm bell that went off, because I'd used it all the time. Anyway, so this guy, his blood oxygen dropped, and it was going down. I think it was down to about 93 the last time I saw him. And his son was there. His son had it as well. And I said, this is bad. This is really bad. I said, look, and I left them with some prednisolone tablets that I had. No, I didn't have to. They'd had some. I said, I think he's going to need steroids and ivermectin. And they actually had their own stock.
Oh, that's good. Okay. And so did he use that protocol? And did it?
So they dug out their steroid tablet, their prednisolone, and sure enough, there was the prednisolone. I said, fine, great, excellent. Take 3 of these, a 25 milligram tablet. If this drops any further, take 3 of these tablets into your father, and then fill him up with ivermectin and what have you. Anyway, so that was about 9 o'clock at night. I gather it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was getting restless, and his blood oxygen, his PO2 had dropped even further with the low on the little monitor I'd given him. So his son, what I told him to do, and gave him the 3 prednisolone tablets and the ivermectin. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he got over it, and over a few days we'd taken him off the steroids. I mean, we had to go back and say, okay, fine, we've been on this, now we're going to taper it off. I think we gave him the 75 milligrams of prednisolone per day for a couple of days, and then gradually tapered it off as you do it. he recovered.
That's
Yeah,
pretty radical, Peter, that you were ministering to people
well,
outside
it
the
wasn't
system. I mean, I've known multiple home birth midwives who have been kind of forced into that. And I think there's now a movement of people who are outside the system and yet still working in some capacity. I have a friend overseas who is an obstetrician, and she was, consulting with people during COVID as well, totally critical of the system and no longer willing to work within it. And I now joke to a friend of mine, the only doctors you can trust now are the ones who are deregistered,
Yeah, well,
because it's a litmus test for their ethical position. That's an overreach statement. It's not going to apply to everyone, of course. But the point is, this historical moment actually weeded out a whole lot of people who were critical thinkers and who had integrity.
yeah, it did. There are still a few around within the system that I'm aware of that managed to fly under the radar. But
Yes, there are.
and look, I probably could have gone and got it. I think through my network, potentially I could have got someone to sign off for it. I just refused to do it. I said, no, this is bigger than that.
So can you elaborate on that? That's an important point.
I've got to make a stand, and I'm not going to have a fraudulent vaccination record because it's shit and I don't believe in it. And I'm not going to, I'll just take early retirement. I'll just bow out gracefully.
Did your colleagues know that you were resisting the mandates, and was there criticism? Because the groupthink was so pervasive. So, so did you suffer what so many dissidents suffered, which was social exclusion and ostracism and judgment?
There were some that I met, particularly in operating theatres. There and then of course, where we could actually have these really private conversations and say, this is crap. And there was one particular theatre I was in with other doctors who also had come from countries, or their families had come from countries where there had been totalitarian governments and executions of large numbers of people who opposed government resources. Anyway, there's the anaesthetist surgeon, both of them, and me, and I think the scrub nurse as well. Were operating this that I used to do. And I remember one day we were, seriously talking about this, and we were, and what we were going to do and how we were going to do it and so forth, and what rubbish it was. And anyway, I remember it was the theatre technician, a young bloke in his 30s, who overheard our conversation and became quite hysterical. And he was threatening to dob us into APRA and the hospital administration and so forth. This is outrageous, you murderer. He went off his triage. And the three of us just looked at each other over our masks, because you wear masks in operating theatres, not to stop viruses, but so you don't spit in the patient's wound. That's like in your mouth.
An appropriate context for a mask.
That's why we wear masks in operating theatres. So we don't spit in the goddamn wound. Anyway, we sort of looked at each other over our masks and realised, oh dear, we've got to keep really quiet about it. Because for us, it's just so long. Well, I did find like that around the system. And then, of course, through, by this time I'm reading people like Robert Malone.
Yes, yeah.
I, as you said, I did encounter Geert Vanden Bossche, who was a catastrophist. And, I thought, I think you're a little bit over the top here. Nature is going to have an amazing way of sorting this out. She's going to be pretty ruthless about it, but she's going to sort it out. She does. And Luc Montagnier, he shared the Nobel Prize for cracking eggs.
Was he the French guy?
The French guy. He was He died.
With the dark hair,
Yes, he died a year or two ago.
He opposed it too, didn't he? Early on.
Yeah. And I discovered Luc Montagnier, and he speaks the most beautiful French. Anyway, now, I discovered these people, and of course, Chetty in South Africa, who gave me the Chetty regimen that I used on this chap who had the complement cascade. And so, the jigsaw puzzle just started falling together. And the problem is, it's like the red tablet, blue tablet thing. From the matrix of the analogy that we all use. Once you've taken that red tablet, can't go back.
No.
Thing you can't unsee. And
there's all these others: black pilled, white pilled, purple pilled.
Yeah, it's like, my years spent in Calcutta. There are certain things I saw there and experienced there that frankly I can't unsee,
Mm, mhm.
um, including the incompetence bordering on corruption of the WHO. And
Right.
in China, but that's a story for another time.
But
Probably.
that would be a thread in your position because, this is another thing I find about dissidents. Many of them are black sheep in their families. Many of them have a backstory where they've encountered some kind of profound corruption or had seen the system in a way that the average person doesn't. And it can be from different vantage points. Like one friend of mine saw it through the cancer industry. I realized it by virtue of having a home birth as a very young woman, that there was this industry geared to making birth worse for women because there was a kind of a whole lot of different reasons, but the medicalization of birth. And so I think, whatever you saw there with the WHO, that will have formed part of your worldview for why you woke up, whereas that technician didn't, for example, who's still believing the experts, as we should be able to do. But many of us who were dissidents had already developed a quite critical consciousness toward experts. And I think people who'd come from totalitarian regimes, well, they were completely sensitized to it. And I saw a lot of them at the protests too with signs. I came to this country to avoid this sort of dictatorship and signs like that were really explicit.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that was more or less it. And so by the time we came to the mandate, I said, no way. No
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. Okay. So this is 2021. You declare your hand.
When did the mandates come in?
I think it was toward the end of 21 is my
Yeah.
feeling.
I remember it was November, but it was 22.
No, by 22, I think they were already in operation.
But I always remember when the mandates came in and the acts fell for those of us who were mandated out
Mm.
at November.
Mhm. Mhm.
Finally, around about January,
Mhm.
the government stopped releasing, or the health department stopped releasing the figures.
This is January 21 or?
Well, it was the January after the mandates came.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the 22. Yeah. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
So a couple of months later, they stopped releasing the figures for hospital admissions for vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And
that's
through,
right. I remember that.
through one of my, by this time, medical contacts
Mm-hmm.
I had who was questioning this, we managed to see what the figures were, the latest figures were. And guess what? The two graphs had crossed over, which is exactly what you would expect to see.
Mm-hmm.
So pro rata, but the graphs had crossed over. And so I'm not talking just absolute numbers. They're going to cross over anyway because you've got more vaccinated in the community than you have unvaccinated.
Much
But
more. Yeah.
pro rata,
Uh-huh.
the two graphs had crossed over. You had a greater chance of being admitted to hospital with COVID if you were vaccinated than if you were unvaccinated.
That's right. I remember when that happened and it was released and then there was no discussion. Did you notice that?
Yeah. And then they stopped releasing the figures. And this is what I had seen happen in all these other countries. What aspect of the model has caused this, I don't know. But you see it all the time. I noticed for many, many years, the number of patients that I had seen over the years, and this is just anecdotal. Who say, I've got to go and get the flu vaccine, doctor. Got to go and get the flu jab. Oh, why? Oh, so I've just got to have, because, I always get sick. And I think, well, if you're always getting sick, you're always getting the flu jab. Maybe let your immune system reset.
Yeah.
Because my eye opener for the flu vaccine was more or less, it's a bunch of people sit around that had as to what they work out what strains of flu are kicking around the world. Well, it takes a while, I guess. It is just, and they put a whole lot of serotypes in any one of these injections for the flu. That doesn't cause what I call immune confusion. I don't know what is. Now, there are various explanations. One of them is a thing called IgG4, and another one is original antigenic sin, as it's nicknamed, or antigenic imprinting. There are a whole lot of these things. And antigenic imprinting, I think from memory now, I might have the details of this wrong, but antigenic imprinting was first identified in the 1960s. And it's after the flu epidemic now I'm going to start using the word vaccine to explain these immune, just for convenience. They're not actually vaccines. The only real vaccine is the one for smallpox, cow. But the term has loosely been applied to all these injections now, which is, of course, once you start dumbing down language, you start moving truth. But anyway, I'm going to start.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, because the word is partisan in its meaning now in a way that it shouldn't be.
Yes. Okay, so what was noted, and I think it's the flu epidemic of about 1963, round about there, early 60s, the pharmaceutical industry had created a vaccine against it within about 3 months. They were rolling it out to people. This is just a simple, old-fashioned protein vaccine. You take a bit of the dead genetic, bit of the
Material.
you put it in with something that's going to cause a bit of irritation, you inject it into someone. Nothing fancy, none of this mRNA bull dust or anything like that. But good old-fashioned. And suddenly with COVID, they couldn't do that. They had to go down the path of this weird thing.
Which was already, all the patents were taken out before.
Yeah. That my warning bill. So anyway, it was noted. So they were able to roll this out quite early on to the vulnerable, which is what you do. You try and protect the vulnerable in a situation. It's what the Swedes did. The Swedes got it as right as they could. They were pillared, remember?
Oh yeah, and same with the lockdowns. They didn't lock down the healthy population.
So you roll this out. They rolled it out to the vulnerable and anybody else who wanted to get it. Well, it was actually noted at some stage, and there was a journal article about it. This is the sort of stuff I was able to read when I was in Calcutta, because of course I was in Calcutta in the 80s. So it wasn't the internet just to read the latest crap about everything.
Yeah,
I'm reading
what a relief.
Yeah, I know. I learned a lot there. Going around libraries and things like that. We were very isolated. So anyway, it was noted that the group that had received the vaccine against the flu, when they eventually got it as a group, after about 2 months lag time, they actually didn't do as well. They didn't do as well. You think, now, probably 2 reasons.
Might our natural immune system do a better job?
Yeah, well, there's something right. So the idea was, okay, maybe we've got a thing here going on. It was called antigenic imprinting, or original antigenic sin.
Okay.
Okay, what happens is, if you meet a virus and your body will create an immune response to that virus.
And you'll remember that. Your body remembers it, doesn't it? Yeah.
You then meet another virus that's very similar.
Yeah, you can respond to it.
But if it's very similar but not the same, your body will actually get confused.
Oh, okay. I thought that meant we were better off.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
At its worst, there's a thing called ADE, antibody-dependent enhancement, but that's another story. That's considered. So if you get us hot on the heels of that within a short period of time, you get infected with another virus that's similar. It takes your immune system some time before it'll switch over to making the appropriate new antibody, because it's still trying to make it for the earlier variant.
I see. Yep. And how does this relate to COVID?
It's imprinted. Okay. I expect that if we are giving injections against the parent strain of COVID,
which
we were doing, because that's what was there, but it's mutated on, and then people are subsequently getting Delta and things like that later on. Omicron, best example.
Yes.
The people who have had the injections, their body's going to get confused because Omicron's come in different, but their body is still going to try and make, initially at some level, going to try and make antibodies against the parent strain before
I see.
The fact that, wait a minute, this is a new one, I've got to make antibodies against this.
But wouldn't that have happened anyway, irrespective of the vaccine, because you would get one version and then another?
If they have that. The vaccine, given that it's useless in the first place. That's the reason why the only group that can provide you immunity, with herd immunity against a mutated organism, where you've got like about 30 proteins in the case of COVID, and the unvaccinated.
Okay, you've just explained that to me in a way now I understand. You're saying because they haven't had the imprinting, they can respond to this virus in a new way. They haven't got this prior imprinting. Is that the point?
Original
Probably haven't said that clearly, but I know what you're saying.
antigenic imprinting, original antigenic. It's like having a great big building with a whole lot of keys for a whole lot of locks, an office building or a school building or something like that. And you've got this key ring and you're trying to go around the keys and open locks and things like that. If you're trying to fiddle through the key ring, it takes ages to find the correct key.
So I'm thinking about the Matrix again. You were talking about the blue pill and the red pill, and now I'm thinking about the key maker in that room. Yes, you got to have the right key.
That's right. And if your immune system's trying to produce the wrong antibody, then you're first. That's one reason. The other reason is a thing called IgG4. IgG. Now, you've got to realize when we talk about things like IgG or IgM or IgA and all those things, these are just names. They're arbitrary names, immune phenomena that we see. It's modern. Again, this is the model. A lot of people believe, they see these little pictures and diagrams of little round things interacting, and this is how the mRNA works and so forth. It's all a model. It's an artist's impression. It's a conceptual thing. And at a molecular level, we don't actually know what's going on. So it's like the same way as in the Middle Ages, the Bible was interpreted quite literally by people. This is the absolute model for how the universe works.
So you were saying that earlier. You mean that this is not, you can't confuse the map for the territory, essentially, is what you're saying. Yeah. And I mean, this is the other reason why, I'm not scientifically or medically trained like you, why for me it's a political question about our autonomy around whether we choose to have it or not, whether we do the research, whether we listen to an expert we trust, whether we don't. Like, for me, that's the bigger question. I believe that there's a kind of sacred autonomy we should have over our own bodies. So this rolling out of legislation that said we had to for the common good, it's always for the common good, as everyone from the communist countries reminded us at those rallies. This idea that we're supposed to do that for the common good, not only does it not make sense according to vaccinology, it seems to me, in that if you are vaccinated, it shouldn't matter whether that person is or isn't. But at the same time, the idea that we have to do it for the common good and therefore override our sense of concern or our opposition, it struck me as completely draconian.
Bizarre.
Bizarre. So back to that process for you, you then decided, no, I'm not doing this. I don't think it's sound. I think it's potentially unsafe. You opted out at that point. So that meant you lost maybe 7 years of work. It doesn't sound like you're upset. And when we have spoken about it in another context, you said, look, it was just an early retirement for me. It wasn't like colleagues who were, 40 years old or 35 or something. So what are your feelings about that? I mean, you in a sense were forced out of your job, which I'm imagining you enjoyed.
Yeah, I did enjoy it. And I enjoy the people I work with. It's part of my identity. And I sort of regained my identity in other things. The lie, I think, irritates me. And I was naive enough to think, the truth's going to come out. It's sort of, this is such a big lie. They can't, it is not possible to keep hiding this. Yeah, the truth's got to come out. Well, I'm still waiting. Remember, we weren't allowed, we're during lockdowns where people were allowed to go to the bottle shop or to a brothel. They weren't allowed to go and see their grandparents.
Yeah. We'll go to the library.
Yeah, I know. That's right. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. Well, we weren't allowed to go and have a haircut.
Yeah. But you could go to the bottle shop or a brothel.
Go to the bottle shop. So I said to Pascal at the time, and I think I told you this when we met at Kathy and Nick spoke. I said to Pascal at the time, when suddenly it was all lifted, I said, "Well, this is ridiculous." I said, "Yeah, I'll wait. I'm not having a haircut until the truth comes out."
Until the truth comes out?
Yeah.
Does that mean you haven't had a haircut, Peter? You have got a ponytail. Yeah.
There it is. Well, the rate things are going, when it's not tied up, it's actually down here. The rate things are going, I reckon my hair will fall out.
Are you going to look like Gandalf?
Yeah, probably. I probably look like Gandalf. I reckon my hair's going to fall out before I had my haircut.
Well, that's a variation on the Pinocchio theme in reverse. How his nose keeps growing with the line, your hair's growing.
Well, keep my ponytail, my hair recede, keeps growing longer as I'm waiting for the truth to come out. But as you can see, there's no sign of the truth being out yet.
Too many people implicated.
I know. Mm.
Mm. So I guess in the here and now, you mentioned to me recently that you're participating in a research project. Now, I haven't actually rung her, but I may interview her on the podcast. But you're saying that there's some mainstream interest in the university system in people who have lost their jobs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I've become very suspicious in some respects. Not suspicious, just sort of, I'm not sure. I've been let down so often
Mm-hmm.
by the mainstream approach.
Mm.
And one scenario that could fall into place from the mainstream actually trying to find out why we took the red pill instead of the blue pill would
Mm.
be that next time something like this happens, to target people like us better. Because they've got to find out how we think and why we thought that way, what they did wrong that actually caused us to say, wait a minute, this is wrong.
Oh, sorry, you mean the research project is a way of identifying
Well, I don't know.
offenders.
The research project's not going to do that. But what the results,
Yeah, the
well,
archive could
yes,
potentially.
the
Yeah.
results of the research, the findings of the research program
Mm-hmm.
could eventually be used by government to say, this is the group that little 5% or whatever who saw through, well, not even saw through, who questioned the narrative. What we have to do for next time, this is where they saw through it. Why?
Mm.
What we have to do next time, we have to be more sophisticated.
Mm.
And
Yeah, we have to get rid of that misinformation,
that's
and
right.
we need to ally their fears in this way and that way, and nudge them in this way and that way, and coerce them in this way and that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Just tell us about the research project in general. Which institution is it in, and what are they trying to find out?
It's being run by the Murdoch Institute, the Royal
Mhm.
Children's Hospital, and all due credit to them that someone has actually said, well, wait a minute, given that COVID ended up being a bit of a fizzer and maybe the response wasn't appropriate, and we obviously lost a lot more people from the healthcare system than government's really admitting.
Mm.
Given all that, then maybe we need to look into what went wrong, why we lost those people and what's happened to them. But it's not, but the answer is actually much simpler than that. The answer is simply that this government's overreach. My integrity, it stops at my skin.
Yeah.
And it's a complete abuse of human dignity to force someone to do that, especially as they had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've heard one woman who was a teacher say it felt not unlike rape. She didn't want to, and it just got a mortgage. And she said it felt like violence on her body, but she wasn't prepared to lose her house and her job because there weren't alternatives for her. I mean, the idea that that's called choice, that's
Mm.
absolute coercion too. It's not even nudging or, we're nudged to do all kinds of things. And pushed, get this bowel screening or get this test or do this or that. But that's different. Even the no jab, no play, which I think is nefarious, but that's still, people could still attend and just pay a higher rate, for example, or not get their family tax benefit B or C or whichever one it is. But this was like, you can't function in society without this. I mean, do you remember when they had the vaccinated and unvaccinated economy? And that
Yes.
was purely for punitive means. I mean, it was purely in order to punish those who had resisted because there was no need for it anymore. That was when everyone was getting Omicron. It was when the lockdowns had been lifted and they said, no, the unvaccinated, it was Dan Andrews, still can't go to these places and can't shop and can't, can only go buy essentials.
Yeah.
And there could be no scientific justification for that. It was punitive entirely.
That's right. Yep, it was just, it was bloody mindedness.
Mm,
And
it was.
my hope is that one day there will be a degree of accountability.
Me too. I
But-
hope so too.
But I can't, but at the rate things are going, I can't see that happening in a hurry.
No.
And an analogy that I sometimes use is you go back to the Vietnam War, and I was, a small child in the Vietnam War, but my brother was in the ballot for conscription. He's my older brother. And I remember the protests, And I remember, the arguments to and in favour of it. Oh, it's to stop the spread of communism. It's your patriotic duty, etc., etc., etc. My brother didn't end up being called up, but that's another story. And there were the conscientious objectors, and the conscientious objectors saw through it, and they, and they were vilified. They lost their jobs, they lost their university positions if they were at university, they lost their careers, they lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
Price the conscientious objectors paid was very, very, very high.
Oh.
Yeah. As the decades have gone past, and we realised that, in fact, the Vietnam War was by and large
And a failure.
and the likes of Thomas Merton was potentially onto it, except he was found murdered in Bangkok hotel room in 1968, supposedly killed by a fan that fell on him. But anyway, he must have known something. But anyway, we now know it was all a con. But there's now this tremendous sense of social empathy for Vietnam veterans, for these poor kids who went over there. They were conscripted. They did go to Vietnam, and what they had to endure was hell.
Lifelong PTSD afterwards.
All the terrific. It was hell what these guys went through. And they were forced to do it. They weren't coerced. They were forced to do it by society. Ultimately, and there is a degree of reconciliation going on with the poor old Vietnam vets. The conscientious objectors were right.
They were right, yeah.
They were right. But has there ever been an apology made for the conscientious objectors for what they went through?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, we've had other apologies, haven't we? But belated ones. I mean, toward the Royal Commission into Sexual Abuse, Aboriginal colonisation. Yeah, we've had various apologies, but we haven't had that one.
I know. There's never been an official acknowledgement of what the conscientious objectors were. I think it's going to be the same with COVID.
Yeah, me too. My sense is there's too many people in power with skin in the game. I also believe, unlike a lot of other dissidents, that there are genuine paradigm disputes. So most of us on the dissident side think, and I understand this, I mean, we're acting on the truth that we hold, but I think that we live in a kind of fractal universe since the advent of the internet, and there are different truths. I mean, because you see that issue after issue divides communities. So now the Israel-Palestine issue is dividing dissidents, or, there's just one issue after another. So I suspect we're actually living in a kind of post-truth universe. It doesn't mean I don't think there is truth, but I think what we have is these echo chambers with a multiplicity of positions. And because science is bought, and again, I'm not saying there isn't an objective truth, because I think there is, but there is now science to support both arguments. And I wrote about that in my Paradigm Wars piece, because science often just looks at one small dimension. It's not holistic in its understanding. And so if you just look at this one dimension for this short period of time, you can say masks are effective. But then there's another study that says, well, actually they're not. And so I think now we're in this kind of paradigm war, and that makes it difficult because there's many more people on the pro side than on our side. I mean, I think we're going to be in that position, like, it may come out, but like victims of the Catholic Church, it's taken a very long time for people to even believe that the priests were capable of the things that they were doing systemically. But I wonder if the vaccine injuries factor isn't going to also play into this, because there are a lot of people that are suffering vaccine injuries now. And again, it's called long COVID often in the mainstream position, but it is coming to the attention that we have these higher death rates by up to 20%.
Yeah. I don't know, but we'll see. It's an ongoing dynamic.
Yeah, that's right. It's ongoing. And on that note, thank you, Peter, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in person. I wish I could have come with a camera crew, but it's not where I'm at yet. But I would love to visit you and Pascali sometime soon, and Kathy. And thanks again. You're my first person coming on who's kind of experienced it at the level of their work and their everyday life. And I'd like that now to be a kind of a component of the podcast.
Okay, brilliant. I'm off to the pub with Nick tonight.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Enjoy.
It's our pub night.
Oh, yeah, you said that was the Wednesdays. Yeah, that's great. Well, it sounds like you've formed a bit of a community of dissidents.
Well, we did actually. It's really interesting. One thing is we did discover a new tribe.
Yeah.
these people who just view the universe differently.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it sounds like they're the right tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. That's great that came out of it. That did for some people and not for others. It seems like some felt more isolated, some found their tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Peter. Okay.
I did. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Veritas podcast. If you'd like to support the show, please subscribe to my Substack, also called Veritas. You can find most of the ideas or the references spoken about in the show linked in the show notes. See you next time.